Left. This is Chairman Jack. Today we're doing another What's the Difference video. Today we're talking about censorship and what the difference of censorship under capitalism and what censorship under socialism means. And today I'm accompanied by...
Hello, it's Taras.
And I'm Ormica.
And so to start it off, I'll hand it off to Taras to basically just read a very simple definition of censorship as kind of a base of what the video is going to talk about.
Yeah, so like Jack said, we're going to start with a pretty broad definition, and then we'll move into the two camps that we're kind of trying to define today. So censorship we can define as the suppression or prohibition of any parts of books, films, news, etc. that are considered obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security.
Yeah, and I think to quickly bounce off of that is just to simply put out why censorship exists under both of these systems. So censorship exists under capitalism when capital cannot handle someone violating the status quo that they are trying to establish, such as when we see this today with the unmasking Antifa law, where they're trying to declare anyone an anti-fascist that they want, because Antifa is not a real organization, like it's not one single body, so anyone who says they're an anti-fascist can be arrested. Versus, or even the Patriot Act, where a lot of people were sent to jail or were sent to Gitmo for believing that they were terrorists and were constantly being spied on, and that is, I believe, a part of censorship. Versus under socialism, when you're in a revolutionary scenario and trying to keep the revolution alive, you can't have people who are like, oh, I'm a fascist and I want to murder all of these people. They can't be allowed to have a platform, as that is just simply going to enable the destruction of the system that we are trying to build.
Right, it's antithetical to the overall health and the overall progression of a socialist movement to allow those units to exist and to just excuse them as like, oh well, that's their freedom to do so, and that's their freedom to be bigoted and hateful and to openly target people that are being oppressed right now. I think it's the responsibility of the socialist revolution to attend for that and to actually approach that stuff and censor that stuff and go after that where they see it, because it's the responsibility of the revolution.
Right, and I think that to go off of that, there's a weird difference when we talk about capitalist censorship. People often forget the history of those bourgeois revolutions. They were often just as violent or had quote unquote censorship, or
absolutely.
Just like a socialist revolution would need to. The Americans pressured anti-British or pro-British newspapers to close, or you would see mass protests, and the government would shut this down in this state or this down in that state.
Or yeah, like the Whiskey Rebellion is a perfect example of this. People publicly assembled into what was mostly a peaceful demonstration, but people still were heavily armed and saying, we want to get rid of our taxes on alcohol. And then George Washington and an army rolled up on them and said, go home.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course there's the only cool bourgeois revolution with the French, and
they were like killing journalists.
Yeah, exactly. And we keep those, and then like there's a double standard, because I in my college course I'm taking Western Civ. I know we're about to hit into the Industrial Revolution and talking about communism, and we've already done a couple of comparisons where the Russian Revolution bad, and they can now demonize the French Revolution a little bit, but then they go and like Napoleon. And in the textbook, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because if we're going to go after one revolution for the things that happened before, it is not a new idea to create censorship in a revolutionary state. It's not a new idea to arrest those who want to commit either terrorist acts or want to cause a civil war. These are not new developments that the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, South Africa to a degree, Venezuela, all these countries, when they had either a national democratic revolution like in Venezuela or South Africa, or the socialist revolutions, like heavily beyond just being progressive, heavily socialist revolutions, Soviet Union, China, etc. They had censorship in the same vein that the Americans did, and I entirely agree with that. That the French did, of simply, if someone wants to tear down the revolution, people go after them and either send them to jail or heavily fine them or just take them out of the picture. And it isn't a new phenomenon. It shouldn't be treated like such just because someone likes the color red.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, and the word, and it really is really bad because I am taking specifically to get a major in history, and they really are just doing that one to one comparison. But but like in the specific contexts, we don't demonize the U.S. Revolution at all. But for everything that the Soviets did, we have to demonize them, and then they'll romanticize people like Napoleon.
Right, there's
Like,
no critical lens or nuance being applied at all. Like, it's just
yeah,
these broads, whoever playing favorites.
I think even to go after these like third camp people who are like, oh well, there's a difference between capitalists and these quote unquote state capitalists or authoritarians or whatever. But let's look at what like Makhno did. Makhno went
Exactly.
after people who resisted the Free State and murdered them and murdered peasants and things like that. Or even if you don't believe that, he still tried to murder opposition. Same thing in Catalonia where they were burning down churches and murdering like priests and shit. Like it's the same exact thing. Like any revolutionary scenario, you are going to see suppression. Like it will always happen. Yet we have to look at when that suppression is aiding the proletariat versus is aiding the bourgeoisie. In this current state, going after anyone who's an anti-fascist makes it extremely easy, paired with the Patriot Act, to send anyone they want to jail at any time, versus making sure fascists don't have a platform can only aid the proletariat and the people.
Exactly. I think it really does come down to the class structures that it's in support of, and like the groups that are being influenced by it. Because in these revolutions, like these bourgeois capitalist revolutions, and these like scenarios, or even just in bourgeois capitalist censorship, like it's directly to support the ruling class, or directly to support like a single ideology, or a single like the people who are at the top of the hierarchy. And in a socialist revolution and in a socialist censorship, it's the entire opposite of that. It's to deconstruct those things, and so that you like break down these divisions of race and class and all of these other things, so that you allow people to actually like live out this egalitarian, workers like revolution worker state that you're trying to create.
Yeah, exactly. And it looks like we're about to go over our time, and we're going to have a podcast after this for anyone who's interested in us expanding upon this video, and that'll come out at a later date. But to be real brief, once again, to quickly give the definition again, basically, censorship just means the suppression and prohibition of any parts of media or arresting people if they are violating some sort of viewing social taboo, such as being obscene, being politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. And why these things happen is either at the behest of capital or the behest of the workers. And that is the major division between what's the difference between capitalist suppression and socialist suppression.
There you go.
And I have been Chairman Jack.
Thank you very much. This is Taras.
and this is Ormica.